Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on SERDP funding opportunities. My name is Deanne Ryder, and I will be moderating today's session. We will get started in a few moments. While we wait for others to log on, I would like to cover a few logistical items. Today's broadcast will be listen only. We will have a question and answer period at the end of the presentation. You may submit questions by using the chat box in the lower left-hand portion of the screen. You need not wait until the Q&A period to submit your questions. In fact, we encourage you to submit them in advance of that session. The phone lines will remain listen only throughout the presentation, so we will not be taking any questions verbally. We will not be able to answer any questions about specific proposal ideas or technologies during this webinar. If you run into any technical difficulties involving the presentation or call-in line, please contact the ReadyTalk technical support as noted in the meeting confirmation email. Please note that both the audio and presentation of today's session will be archived on our solicitation webpage in case you would like to refer to them in the future. Today's speakers are Dr. Ann Andrews, the Acting Executive Director of SERDP and ESTCP, and Dr. Andrea Leeson, the SERDP and ESTCP Program Manager for Environmental Restoration. Before I turn it over to Ann and Andrea, I remind phone participants that this is a listen-only session, and to submit questions, please use the chat box in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. Ann?
Welcome to everyone. Today we will be walking through the solicitation for SERDP projects to begin in FY15. But before we do that, I wanted to start with a few words about who we are and general programmatic information for those of you who aren't familiar with SERDP. We run two programs out of our office. SERDP is a science and technology program. I'll talk a little bit more in detail about that on the next chart. And ESTCP, the Environmental Security Technology Certification Program, is a demonstration validation program. ESTCP is operated with separate solicitations, and you can look for those later in the year. This brief is about the SERDP opportunities for the project starting in FY15. SERDP is the Strategic Environmental Research and Development Program. It was established by Congress in 1991, and it's unique in the federal government in that it is a partnership between DoD, the Department of Energy, and the Environmental Protection Agency. All three agencies actively participate in helping us to identify our research needs and identify proposals and evaluate proposals and manage the projects. SERDP is a requirements-driven program. We, by statute, are allowed to support research that ranges from basic and applied research that can have longer-term timelines to advanced technology development to address near-term needs. This next chart shows where SERDP and ESTCP fall in DoD's technology development process. The services identify requirements which feed into developing our topics and statements of need. In SERDP, as I said, we conduct basic and applied research and advanced technology development, and ESTCP conducts demonstration and validation with an eye towards developing the information that's needed for implementation of new technologies. Both of these programs reside in the Office of the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Installations and Environment. The drivers that we respond to with both SERDP and ESTCP come in two broad categories. The first is in the reduction of current and future liabilities. And this includes both contamination from past practices, such as contamination of groundwater, soils, and sediments, the liability associated with unexploded ordnance on our current and past ranges, and contaminants of emerging regulatory concern. Future liabilities are covered under what's traditionally thought of as pollution prevention, eliminating the hazardous chemicals from our production processes, maintenance processes, and waste streams. The second major set of drivers are to address the sustainability of our ranges, facilities, and operations. And these include the topics associated with management of our natural resources, including threatened and endangered species, marine mammals, invasive species, include things like the impact of our operations as far as air emissions, dust, and noise, the management of unexploded ordnance and munitions constituents on our active ranges, and DoD's response to climate change. We operate both programs in a management structure that aligns with technical expertise that's needed to manage the project. So in SERDP, we operate weapons systems and platforms, environmental restoration, munitions response, resource conservation and climate change, and you'll see that that's how the statements of need are organized. Now I'm going to hand off the presentation to Dr. Andrea Leeson, our Program Manager for Environmental Restoration, and she will walk through the specifics of the FY15 solicitation.
Thank you, Ann. At this time, I'd like to discuss the two types of solicitations we have this year and walk you through the process we have for them as well as the requirements for submitting the various proposals. As you can see in this slide, we have the core statements of need that are being released as well as our SERDP exploratory development statement of needs, and we refer to these as the seed statement of needs. Under the core statement of needs, these involve multiple awards per SON. There are also multi-year proposals as well as limited scope proposals. Our limited scope proposals are limited to 1 year and roughly about $150,000. We receive proposals under two mechanisms. We have our broad agency announcement, and that is where people associated with universities, industries, or non-governmental organizations can submit their proposal. And we also have a federal call we release, which is open to members of the DoD as well as other federal agencies. Under the SERDP seed statement of need, as related to the limited scope, these proposals are $150,000 or less, and they are to last for approximately 1 year. These are very specifically for innovative, high-risk, and high-payoff work. And as with our core statements of needs, proposals can be submitted under both the BAA or the federal call. Shown here in this slide is the basic process for the core solicitation. The seed solicitation process is a little different, and we will cover that in a couple of slides. As you can see at the top, we have the two different announcements for the solicitation, the broad agency announcement and the federal call, and these both feed into the same process. So each of these proposals, no matter which mechanism they come into the solicitation, they are treated the same at that point. Both proposers are required to submit a pre-proposal initially. This is simply a 5-page paper, and it's intended to provide us a good summary of the proposed effort, and there is no cost proposal at this time required with a pre-proposal. And in that way, it allows proposers to not spend a tremendous amount of effort before really launching into a full proposal and before the program office and our reviewers can make sure that the submitted ideas are relevant to the statement of need. The pre-proposals come in for the staff review, and the very first gate that they have to go through is a relevancy gate. Does the idea meet the objectives of the statement of need? It is critical that proposals that come in clearly address the statement of need under which they are submitted. The staff does a down select of those proposals, and then full proposal requests are sent out. Every full proposal that comes in, once it still needs to meet the relevancy gate, but then it is sent for peer review. After the peer review process, the proposals that rank the highest based on technical merit come before our technical review committee. The technical review committee is composed of members of each of the various military services, as well as representatives from the EPA and the DOE. The technical committee will make their recommendations on which proposals they believe are of the highest technical merit and should be funded. This recommendation goes before the SERDP staff, where we make the final selection based on technical merit and budgetary constraints, and then those projects go before the scientific advisory board for final approval. Shown here in this table are the core solicitation dates. Pre-proposals are due on January 9th, 2014 at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Pre-proposals are only accepted through the online submission. This is a very hard and firm deadline. No late submittals can be accepted. By early February 2014, we will send out requests for full proposals, with the full proposals due on March 11th, 2014 at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, they are submitted online, and again, this is a very hard deadline. No late submittals are accepted. Selection letters are then sent out to proposers by July or August 2014, with presentations to the Scientific Advisory Board scheduled for September or October of 2014. Once projects are approved by the Scientific Advisory Board, then we hope for project initiation sometime in the spring of 2015. Our next slide then focuses on the solicitation process for the seed proposals. This process is somewhat similar to the core solicitation process. It's just slightly truncated. There is no pre-proposal required under a seed solicitation. Proposals are accepted both through the broad agency announcement and the federal call for proposals, as with the core. However, at this point, we just accept the full proposals. Those full proposals go through a staff review. There is no peer review at this stage in evaluating seed proposals. And then from the staff review, once those proposals pass a relevancy gate, they will go to the technical committee. This is the same technical committee that looks at the core proposals also. The technical committee then makes their recommendations to the SERDP staff, and again, the SERDP staff evaluates those proposals based on their technical merit and budgetary constraints. This table here shows the seed solicitation dates. Full proposals for the seed solicitation are due on March 11th, 2014 at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, this is a hard submittal date. No late submittals will be accepted. Selection letters are typically sent by July or August 2014, with again project initiation in spring 2015. If I haven't mentioned it before, these projects do not go before the Scientific Advisory Board. That would be a later step if continuing work is selected. This next slide shows the solicitation statistics for FY14 solicitation, and this is just to give you some sense of the percentage of proposals we have typically accepted in past years. These statistics are fairly similar from year to year. Of course, there's some variation, but these percentages are roughly the same from year to year. In FY14, we received 271 pre-proposals, and roughly about 39% of those we requested a full proposal. We received 104 full proposals, and roughly 28% of those were selected for funding. In the seed solicitation, we received 40 proposals, and approximately 18% of those were eventually selected for funding. At this point now, we would like to walk through the FY15 statements of need. We do not intend to go into tremendous detail about the details of each of these statement of needs. We intend to only cover the highlights. You can find the specific details of each of these statements of need on our website. Also, if you have specific questions about any of the statement of needs, we'd like to direct you to the program manager who's listed in each of the statement of needs, and they can answer your questions in more detail. This first three statement of needs that I'll go through are under the Environmental Restoration Program area. The first one is a core statement of need on improved understanding of long-term natural attenuation processes on contaminants in groundwater. There are several sub-objectives here in this statement of need, and I'd like to point out that proposals can address one or more of these sub-objectives. It is not necessary to try to address every single one in a proposal that's submitted. The key item I would like to point out here is that in August 2013, we hosted a workshop on long-term management of contaminated groundwater sites. And as in the past, our workshops are used to help guide our strategy in various different technical areas. In this case, the workshop report covers some of the issues that are covered in this statement of need, and so I highly recommend if you are interested in submitting to this statement of need, please go to the workshop report that is on our website, The link for the workshop report is provided here in this slide also. Review that report and familiarize yourself with the discussions. There's much more detail provided in the workshop report than is provided in the statement of need, and it provides very important background information on the statement of need. This statement of need is really focused on the common chlorinated solvents and their daughter products, and these type of details are also provided in the statement of need online. The next statement of need under environmental restoration was a seed statement of need. The first one is improved measurement and assessment of off-site contaminant influx and potential recontamination of aquatic sediment sites. As with the previous statement of need, this statement of need was also related to a workshop we held. This workshop was actually held in July 2012, and it focused on long-term management of contaminated sediments. Again, I really recommend that you take a look at this workshop report to get more background information about the discussions that occurred that led to this statement of need. And then the last statement of need released under the Environmental Restoration Program area is again within the contaminated sediments area, and is specifically on the development of passive sampling methodologies to measure contaminant bioavailability in aquatic sediments. Again, I recommend here that you also refer to the workshop report that was released in July of 2012, again available on our website. This specific statement of need has two sub-objectives. Again, proposals can address one or more, but given that this is a seed statement of need, most likely it will make most sense to tackle one of these sub-objectives in your proposal. And just so I can make it clear, the first sub-objective is specifically looking at development of passive sampling methodologies for one of the following groups of contaminants that are listed: dioxin and furans, specific metals, or munitions constituents of concern. The second sub-objective is specifically looking at developing multi-purpose passive sampling devices that can measure multiple different types of contaminants, and the contaminants of interest are listed there in the statement of need. At this point, I'd like to turn it back to Dr. Andrews, and she will cover the remaining statement of needs.
Thank you, Andrea. We'll turn next to the statements of need that were put out in the three other program areas. In the area of munition response, we put out a single statement of need this year that deals with the detection, classification, and remediation of munitions in the underwater environment. The statement of need is looking fairly broadly across all aspects of dealing with munitions in the underwater environment. Their interest is in both freshwater environments such as ponds, lakes, and rivers, as well as estuaries, coastal and open ocean areas. The range of munitions that can be found in these types of sites is from very small projectiles and mortars to very large bombs. And technology need not deal with all environments or all combinations of munitions types simultaneously, but should be broadly applicable enough that it solves a relevant problem. We are looking primarily at water depths up to 35 meters where munitions are accessible to people. And the topics that are particularly of interest are wide area and detailed surveys, so finding the areas where large concentrations of munitions are, or finding individual munitions so that they can be either destroyed or retrieved, cost-effective recovery and disposal, and the characteristics of munitions underwater and their environment that can affect either the ability to detect and classify munitions using sensors or the ability to do appropriate remediation activities. In the area of resource conservation and climate change, there are two statements of need this year. The first has to do with looking further out in DoD's management of species and ecosystems, and specifically looking at new paradigms for managing species and ecosystems in a non-stationary world. And here we're really looking to address the management challenges associated with the potential futures that are relevant and testable and can be used by DoD managers 25 years into the future. The real motivation behind this statement of need is to move beyond the social, regulatory, and management frameworks of the current day, where we focus mostly on reacting to individual listed species and environments and assume a static range of variability. The second statement of need in resource conservation and climate change is adapting to changes in the hydrologic cycle under non-stationary climate conditions. And here we're really looking at changes in the intensity and variability of heavy precipitation and runoff events and the implications of those changes in the geographic regions and applications that are of interest to DoD. Specifically, this SON looks at developing methodologies for constructing intensity, duration, and frequency curves, especially under non-stationary conditions, and improved understanding how changes in snowmelt and runoff events can impact DoD's assets. We're also looking for adaptive frameworks to address DoD infrastructure planning and management decisions. Finally, in the area of weapon systems and platform, there are 4 statements of need. 2 are for the core solicitation and 2 are for the seed solicitation. The first of the core solicitation statements of need has to do with developing sustainable gasless delay formulations. And this is to develop formulations that are for use in timing devices that are free of perchlorate, lead, and hexavalent chromium. And the ultimate goal of this SON is to integrate these delay technologies into full-up prototype systems that will maintain or exceed the requirements listed here. And I'm not going to read through those requirements, but the main point of the bullet is that projects should really be focused toward the end state at the end of the project as being a full-up test in a prototype. And particularly of note for this statement of need is that coordination with a manufacturing partner is highly desirable because the formulations really need to be compatible with current manufacturing methods. The second of the core statements of need in weapons and platforms has to do with standardizing test methodologies for low observable coating durability. And the driver here has to do with the fact that predictions of the lifetime of low observable coatings are generally poor. And this results in planned maintenance that is not appropriate to the actual lifetime of the coating. So what we'd like to do is develop standardized test methodologies that can realistically recreate the aircraft environment in order to accurately assess the durability of the low observable coating. And ultimately, the goal of this is then to be able to do appropriate planned maintenance, which will reduce the volume of hazardous waste and air emissions from stripping and application, improve the material durability, and reduce the ultimate platform lifecycle cost. The first of the seed statements of need in weapons and platforms is related to sustainable solvents for use in degreasing. And it's to develop solvents that are free of hazardous air pollutants, have low or no volatile organic compounds, and low or no global warming potential. And the key to this is really the fourth bullet, that they also need to meet the military performance requirement when used in existing degreasing equipment. And that's really the unique DoD tie to this statement of need. So I would refer you to looking at the relevant requirements when considering proposing against this. And finally, the second statement of need in the seed solicitation for weapons and platforms is related to the development of a low contact resistance passivate for electrical system components. And here we want to develop technologies for the passivation of corrosion resistant coatings used in DoD electrical system components that do not use hexavalent chromium. And this proposal must, as many of the proposals in weapons and platform, meet or exceed the performance of current systems and be compatible with the low hydrogen embrittlement alkaline zinc nickel coatings that are now being introduced. Now we'll turn back to a few more general comments. The proposal selection criteria for the core solicitation, as Andrea referred to earlier, the first thing that we look at when a proposal comes in is whether it's relevant. and this is a pass-fail criteria. Proposals that don't pass these two questions are not examined further. So does it address a statement of need objective, and is it basic research, applied research, or advanced technology development? Those are the things that SERDP is allowed to invest in. So if it's demonstration validation, it won't be looked at further. If it's outside of a statement of need objective, it won't be looked at further. Then of the scored criteria, the most important is technical merit, followed by personnel, followed by cost. And here cost means cost reasonableness. We look at whether the cost that you propose reflects the complexity of the work that needs to be done, not necessarily that you have the lowest price proposal, because sometimes that's an indication that the complexity really isn't appreciated. Those are the pre-proposal selection criteria. If you are requested to submit a full proposal, the field proposals are also rated on transition plans and small business participation for those that come in under the BAA. The seed selection criteria are similar, but they're really tailored to the high-risk, high-payoff intent of the seed program. So we again look at relevance and technical merit. But one aspect of the technical merit we look at here is the innovation. We're really looking for the leap-ahead solutions when we put out a seed solicitation. We're not looking for the incremental improvement. The other thing that's a bit different here is we look very specifically at transition potential. And here we're really looking to understand, have you identified a body of work that when you're done with it, it will provide you with the data or the insight that are needed to support a decision to take on a full multi-year effort. And it is very important that you have in mind an end state at the end of the seed project that meets those criteria. Some hallmarks of a competitive proposal, I'm sure this has become clear as Andrea and I have been talking. The first is that it clearly addresses the statement of need. So I would encourage you to read the statements of need carefully. Work that's outside of the statement of need is not considered responsive, and we really can't go forward with it. We also want the proposal to demonstrate an understanding of the state of the science. Excuse me. And one of the things that we're really looking for in a strong proposal is hypothesis-driven work. We would like a good understanding of what questions you want to answer and why those questions are important to meeting the objectives of the statement of need. And our evaluation is really focused on the technical approach, and that it's detailed and then it's clearly thought out. Finally, the details of all of this, the instructions, the statements of need, are on the SERDP and ESTCP website, which is on the final chart.
Thanks, Anne. We will be answering as many questions as time permits, focusing on those that are generally applicable to all submitters or logistical in nature. Please note that we will not be able to answer questions about specific proposal ideas or technologies during this webinar. If you have a technical question, please contact the program manager listed on the appropriate statement of need. So one of the first questions that we have is the pre-proposal required for both a seed and standard proposal?
A pre-proposal is not required if you are submitting to the seed solicitation. If you are submitting to the core solicitation and you're submitting either a standard or a limited scope proposal, then a pre-proposal is required for both of those. So you just have to be careful. It depends on the solicitation that you're applying to.
Are there energy-related research projects eligible for consideration under SERDP?
No, we do not have any statements of need related to energy. Energy has typically been supported under the sister program ESTCP in the mode of demonstration and validation rather than research. And I would encourage you to check back early next year as we start to pull together the ESTCP solicitation for 2015.
What is the average size of a proposal in terms of cost, duration, and number of performers?
Proposals range greatly. A typical SERDP proposal might run $300,000 to $400,000 a year for 3 to 4 years. But it really needs to be tailored to the complexity of the problem and the duration that's needed. A complicated ecology project might require a longer term, whereas a fairly straightforward applied research question might be a shorter 2-year project. So they range all the way from 1 year and 100 or 200K up to multi-million-dollar proposals, and we really do rate them based upon whether the cost and duration are appropriate to the complexity of the problem.
Is there a limit on indirect costs for a proposal?
Only in that we typically contract proposals as cost plus fixed fee contracts, and all of those types of contracts need to have established rates that are approved by DCAA. So that will be, you should propose your institution's rates. If you know that they are approved rates, then that's what we will go with, and otherwise there's a long process associated with getting to approved rates.
In core and seed processes, when are proposals required to submit a budget?
In the core process, in the pre-proposal, you do not submit a formal budget. You give strictly an estimate of one number per year and then a total of what you expect. In the full proposal for the core solicitation, then you would be required to submit the full cost proposal, and I would direct you to look at the submittal dates for the full proposal. In the seed solicitation process, you are required to submit the full cost proposal when you submit your full proposal at the time the seed proposals are initially due.
Are applicants notified at each step whether their proposal will go on to the next step or not?
Yes, they are notified. If you look back at the dates when we receive the pre-proposals and we send out the request for full proposals, we also will send out notifications if your pre-proposal was not selected to receive a full proposal. And then the next step, when we make the final selection, we send out both the selection letters as well as letters that notify you if your proposal was not selected.
Building on to an earlier question, do limited scope proposals require a pre-proposal as well?
Yes, they do.
How can academic organization partners partner with DoD labs, and who should take the lead in these situations?
That's really at the discretion of the proposers. It is possible for us to accept a proposal either way. If the academic lab wants to take the lead, then the proposal would come under the broad agency announcement, and we would directly fund the federal performers. If the federal agency wants to take the lead, then the proposal would come in under the federal call for proposals, and the federal agency would be responsible for contracting with any private sector partner.
How is proprietary information or intellectual property dealt with?
If that information is developed as part of the proposal process, the lead PI does retain rights to that. If it leads to some sort of patent, then the government is able to use.
The government's entitled to use of the intellectual property, but that doesn't prevent the originator of the intellectual property from using and licensing it as they see fit. It's a matter of how it can be marketed back to the federal government. I'm not sure exactly what the question meant as far as how is proprietary information dealt with. We get, of course, proposals are considered proprietary and their information is strictly protected, and all of the people who handle proposals sign non-disclosure and conflict of interest forms. And as far as intellectual property, the federal acquisition regulations spell out the rules for dealing with intellectual property in great detail.
Can an institution submit more than one proposal to address the same SON?
Yes.
Is there a listing of the members of the technical committees that participate during this review available?
That's not something that we typically publish. There are DoD restrictions on publishing names and contact information of people, and the committees also turn over fairly regularly, so that is not something that we provide.
Are there discussions allowed between the pre-proposal and the submittal of a full proposal?
I assume you mean discussions with the SERDP staff, and no, and typically we will not discuss in detail the sort of topic you're presenting or you're going to propose on. If you have questions about the process, we can certainly answer those, and when we send back the selection letters requesting the full proposal, we also may provide comments back to you on issues that we need to see in greater detail or suggestions we may have for modification of the full proposal.
Can the conservation/management of related projects only be carried out on DoD-managed lands?
Not strictly speaking, but we are a DoD program, and it is very important that there is a clear tie between any research we support and a DoD need. So if you can't find a DoD installation or land that is appropriate to carry out your project, that might be an indication that it's maybe not as relevant to DoD as we might like it to be. But there certainly are examples of many projects where we've done some data collection on 2 or 3 DoD lands and some related data collection on other federal lands nearby because they happen to be technically appropriate to the project.
If a limited scope proposal is funded and the project is successful, is there a mechanism for additional funds, or would the proposal have to go through a solicitation again?
The proposal would not have to go through a solicitation again. We do have a mechanism for follow-on funding. It is not automatic. A limited scope proposal is expected to come in and brief the SERDP staff as well as our technical committee, and at that time then you can show the results of your work and give us your opinion on whether additional work is warranted. The SERDP staff would then opt to either request another follow-on proposal or not, and if a follow-on proposal is requested, that just comes in separately, not through a solicitation. It goes through peer review, presents to the Scientific Advisory Board, and then goes through the contracting process.
Is there a list or website that contains ecosystems that DoD manages, and are there places that DoD manages beyond military bases?
I don't know of a list off the top of my head. We can, if such a thing is available, we can post it as an addendum to this solicitation. We will do some research into whether this all resides in one nice, neat place. As to the second part of that question, not to my knowledge.
How do you define useful for DoD resource managers in 25 years from now?
Well, I think that there are 2 parts to that question. Useful to DoD managers means that we have an obligation to manage our lands both to meet the nation's environmental laws and to manage them sustainably so that they continue to be useful to DoD. And so by useful to DoD managers, what we mean is providing the information needed to allow them to make smart decisions to take actions with regard to conservation measures. The 25 years from now really is the question of what would be useful 25 years from now. The answer would be the same. The idea here, though, is to look forward to the conditions that could be anticipated 25 years from now.
Is it necessary or important to have a DoD collaborator on the proposal?
It is not necessary. We see all types of teams come into the solicitations, so it is not a requirement.
Can you elaborate on requirements for small business involvement?
The DoD has goals for small business involvement. The specifics of those goals are spelled out in the evaluation criteria when we put out the put out the request for the full proposals. Generally speaking, they are looking for 5% of the funds of any given project to go to a small business. This is not a hard and fast requirement. It is a goal, and we see proposals that range from being submitted by a small business to meeting that goal to proposals that maybe for some reason or other cannot meet that goal.
Does an earlier accepted proposed project from SERDP or ESCCP help or hinder additional or new proposals?
That really should have no impact on a new proposal that comes in. Certainly if you're building on earlier work, that's earlier successful work, that's helpful to note in the proposal, but I wouldn't say it necessarily either helps or hinders.
What is meant by demonstration validation versus other allowable research?
So the way we separate the missions, excuse me, the missions of SERDP and the SERDP is that SERDP performs research and development, and by that what we mean is basic research, which we don't support a lot of, but we support some of. And basic research I would identify as curiosity-driven research, kind of open sky. Mostly we support applied research, which is we have a particular issue that we want to gain better understanding in order for us to do a better job managing it or treating a contaminant or whatever. So that would be applied research. The other thing we cover in SERDP is advanced technology development, which I would say would be taking something to a point where you're developing a prototype instrument or so the sort of hardware that would be necessary to evaluate the usefulness of an approach, but not to develop a field-hardened, take it out and use it for a long period of time. By demonstration validation, we mean taking something to the field so that you can, that proof of concept has been established and you want to take it out and do field demonstrations under realistic conditions so you can understand how it works in the field, what its production rates are, what its reliability is, what its true costs are. So it's a much more rigorous evaluation of, is this going to work for our needs, rather than an exploration of the science.
Is there any coordination of SERDP efforts to address DoD needs and other United States government agencies' needs, such as NASA?
On specific topics, we have some commonality, but we are driven by the research requirements generated by the Department of Defense. So, for example, a few years ago we had a solicitation that dealt with tin whiskers in solder joints. This is a very important aerospace application, and there's a lot of commonality with NASA. But it wasn't in any way co-funded by NASA. It was, you know, the research could be useful to either agency, but it was driven by the DoD's needs. And that is always going to be the case for SERDP efforts.
How are reviewers selected for the review of these proposals?
Our peer review process is very similar to any peer review process used in academic journals, in that we search, we go through journal articles of relevant research. We use reviewers from really all over the world to try to get the right people who have some background and can review the proposals knowledgeably in that particular area.
How are SONs developed, and more importantly, is there a way to submit ideas for future SONs?
Statements of need come into us from quite a variety of different avenues. One is, as Andrea alluded to earlier, when we hold workshops, they generally are driven by us wanting to establish a strategy in a very particular area that'll cover the next 3 to 5 years. So they're really focused on what are the knowledge gaps, what are the questions we need to answer to move forward in this area. And that can develop a number of statements of need. We also get statements of need that come in from our technical committee members that address maybe very service-specific priorities. Our scientific advisory board gives us suggestions for statements of need. We attend professional meetings in all of the topics that we address to keep abreast of who's working on what and where the relevant questions remain.
Is there any preference for proposals having only one investigator versus multiple investigators?
There really is no preference. We really suggest that you propose what makes the most sense technically to address your research objectives.
How much flexibility is there in the proposed start date?
That typically is governed by the contracting process. If you want to have a later start date, I guess that's something that could be negotiated with us. I'm not sure that's the point of the question, though. If the question has to do with whether you could start earlier, the answer is almost certainly not. It has to do with how quickly we can get money in the fiscal year that we're starting the project, and then how quickly, once we have funds available, a contract could be let. And that process, I'll be honest, over the time that I've been here has increased tremendously, and it takes several months to as much as 6 or 8 months sometimes.
Are there restrictions about the types of expenses to be included in a proposal? For instance, is student tuition covered?
We do cover student tuition in our research efforts. We believe strongly in the training of students. It's important for the future of the research. Having said that, there are some types of expenses we don't necessarily cover. We are not in the business of equipping labs completely. We generally do not fund major purchases of equipment. Anne, do you have anything to add to that?
Not really. Again, it really depends on the type of research. There are restrictions on travel, particularly international travel and things like that, that we would look at very closely. But I think you pretty much hit it.
Are federal lead organizations responsible for contracting with private sector partners, and does this include universities?
The answer to that are yes and yes. If a federal organization comes in as the lead, they are responsible for all of the administration of the project, including contracting.
Is there a website where previously funded proposals can be viewed?
Every project that we have ever funded is on our website. They all have a project page, which is a description of the objective and the technical approach and what we expect to get to at the end of it. And then when the project is completed, that page is updated to reflect what that project actually accomplished. And also all of the reports that came in as the result of that project are posted there as well.
Are failed pre-proposals eligible for full proposal submission with major revisions?
No, they are not. If you do not specifically receive a request for a full proposal, you may not submit a full proposal.
Differences.
Are projects that span multiple installations viewed more favorably?
We really do not view that more favorably, and conversely, it's not frowned upon either. We've touched on this already, I think, but really people should propose the project team that makes the most sense technically.
Are there any issues associated with having investigators from outside of the U.S. participate in a proposal?
No, there isn't. We have leads from other countries currently within our portfolio, and there's no restriction on that.
The only thing I would add is that getting foreign nationals onto military installations can be problematic and at the very least time-consuming. So it is something that we should be aware of if you are planning on a significant contribution that requires you getting a foreign national either onto an installation or having a foreign national have access to what an installation might regard as sensitive information.
Can I discuss my potential research with the SERDP program manager to determine if it's a fit?
Generally, no. We do not have those kind of conversations. The pre-proposal process is really designed to do that. We strongly encourage you to read the statement of need carefully, understand those objectives, and make sure your proposal clearly addresses the statement of need. The program managers that are listed in the statement of needs are there to answer questions about process. If there's something not clear in the statement of need, they're happy to answer those types of questions, but they're not there to really listen to your idea and essentially vet your idea before you submit the pre-proposal.
For the federal call for proposals, does that mean that the whole team has to be from a federal agency or just the lead institution?
For each of the solicitations, the lead institution is what determines which call you come under. So for the federal call, just the lead PI would be the federal staff. If the lead person is from the private agency, then that proposal needs to be submitted to the BAA.
Thank you. This was the last general question that we have received. There are other questions that are more SON or technology specific. Again, we ask that you contact the program manager for that specific area. Thank you for attending the webinar today. As a reminder, the presentation and audio will be archived for future reference on the SERDP solicitation webpage. This concludes today's webcast.